This is my farm, and right now it is on the verge of bankruptcy. That's why I gradually started restoring it. My goal, to save it and make it profitable so that it starts bringing in tens of thousands of dollars every month. If you're interested, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. And now, let's head to the farm. Waking up early in the morning, I immediately ran over to our hayfield to check whether the grass had finished fermenting into silage. As I got closer to one of the bales, I saw that the process had already reached 91%. That meant it was time to think about how we were going to transport all these bales. There were really a lot of them, and that's exactly what today's work would be about. So I went straight to the tractor, got behind the wheel, and headed to the store. After all, we'd have to buy some new equipment sooner or later. Once I arrived at the store, I started looking for a platform trailer that could handle the transport. I found a great option, but it cost $22,500. Money we didn't have at the moment, so I decided to head back to the farm and earn a bit more first. To make up the needed amount, I chose to sell some wood. I hooked up the log trailer and drove to the forest. After cutting down a few trees and loading them carefully, the trailer was full in no time. That meant it was time to drive to the sawmill and sell the logs. When I arrived, I sold the wood, and our balance went up by nearly $10,000. That was just enough to buy the long-awaited trailer, so I returned to the store right away and purchased it. The trailer turned out to be quite large, but luckily our new tractor had no trouble pulling it. I hitched it up and drove back to the farm. Once home, I parked the trailer in place and immediately started loading the bales. They had just finished fermenting and turned into ready silage. I drove up to the first bale, carefully lifted it onto the platform, and went on to collect the rest. With every new bale, the trailer grew heavier, the ground beneath it started to sink, and the tractor began to lose traction. I stopped loading when I realized the tractor was barely pulling the trailer and decided to head for the dirt road. Fortunately, the machinery handled much better there, so I drove straight to the selling point. And while I was hauling this massive load of bales, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. When I arrived, I sold all the bales on the trailer and earned a bit more than $32,000. That really made me happy. I hadn't expected to earn that much. But the work wasn't over yet. A few bales still remained in the field, so I went back for them. After collecting and selling the remaining bales, I noticed that our balance had grown to just over $43,000. A fantastic result. Satisfied with the day's work, I returned home and parked the new trailer in its place. With the money I had earned, I decided to build a silage pit near the farm. I chose a rather large one that cost $20,000. It had 2 separate compartments, which was really convenient. Now we'd be able to load twice as much grass, and as a result, produce a lot more silage. After making the purchase, I returned to the farm because it was time to start filling the new silage pits. I attached the mower to the tractor and headed out to cut the grass. Even with the new tractor, the job took quite a while. The field was large and the grass was thick, but little by little, I mowed one row after another. When the sun began to set behind the horizon, I realized it was time to call it a day. I drove the tractor back to the barn and, looking over the day's work, felt satisfied. We had achieved a lot today, but there was still plenty ahead. Tomorrow, the work would continue, so I went to rest, ready to start fresh and full of energy in the morning. The next day brought perfect weather, ideal for continuing the grass mowing. Wasting no time, I jumped into our tractor and headed out to work. However, once I drove onto the field, I noticed that our canola was already fully ripe. So I decided to hire a worker to keep mowing the grass while I headed back to the farm. There, I switched to our smaller tractor and drove to the store. Because to harvest the crop, we needed a combine harvester and a trailer to unload the collected grain into. I had to choose the cheapest option since we didn't have much money and it definitely wouldn't be enough for everything at once. In the end, I bought a harvester, a header for it, and also found a suitable trailer for $6,000. It wasn't very large, but good enough for a start. Altogether, I spent a bit more than $19,000 on all the equipment, but now we had everything we needed to begin the harvest. I attached the trailer to the tractor and the header to the harvester. Then I delivered all the equipment to the field and hired a worker who would follow me all the way back to the farm. Once we arrived, I decided to start harvesting right away. I also hired another worker to operate the harvester, while I focused on transporting the crops, delivering the harvested canola directly to the selling point. As soon as the harvester's tank was full, I drove up and he unloaded all the grain into our trailer before continuing his work. Meanwhile, our second worker on the new tractor kept mowing the grass. Hopefully, that would give us plenty of silage later. Gradually, there was less and less canola left in the field. When the trailer was completely full, I drove to the selling station. Upon arrival, I unloaded the entire harvest and received just over $7,000. Not bad for such a small field. Then I got back into the tractor and returned to the harvester, as its tank could fill up again at any moment. After some time, the harvest was finally complete. All the crops had been collected, and we filled another trailer. I took it to sell, and after the deal, our balance had risen to almost $15,000. An excellent result for the beginning of the harvest season. There was still plenty of work left for the day, so I decided not to waste any time and headed home. First, I parked all the equipment that had been used for the harvest under the shelter. While our tractor kept mowing the grass, I decided to make a quick trip to the store and use the money we had earned to buy a tedder. I managed to find a suitable model. It cost just over $1,000. I attached it to the tractor and drove to our hayfield. Once I arrived, I immediately started tedding the already cut grass, carefully spreading it into windrows. After a few rows, I noticed that our worker had just finished mowing the rest of the grass. So I replaced myself with him and switched over to the larger tractor. First, I took the mower back to the farm, and then I went to the store again. This time, I needed to buy a forage trailer, since we had to collect and transport the grass to the silage pit somehow. At the store, I bought a pretty good trailer that cost almost $13,000. Fortunately, we had just enough money in our balance to afford it. When I returned to the farm, I realized the day was already coming to an end, but there was still a lot to do. So I got straight to work. I hooked up the trailer and started collecting the grass. As soon as the trailer was full, I immediately drove the load to the silage pit. The process took much longer than I expected, but by the evening, most of the grass had already been delivered to its place. I worked until sunset. The sun had almost disappeared beyond the horizon, but I still didn't manage to collect all the grass, so I decided to call it a day. I carefully parked all the equipment in its place and went to rest. Another busy day was waiting ahead. The next morning, I had to finish collecting all the remaining grass, and there was just under half of it left. Today, we would definitely get it done. By the way, I noticed that our silage pit was already half full, which made me really happy. The work was going great, but there was no time to waste. It was time to get back to it. I got into the tractor and continued collecting the grass, determined to finish everything by the end of the day. After some time, I finally managed to finish the job. All the grass we had mowed was fully collected. Only one last trailer remained to be unloaded. We had managed to mow quite a large area, and I think that definitely deserves your like. Now we unload the final trailer, leave it in place, and begin compacting the silage so that the fermentation process can start. I should note that we managed to fill almost an entire section of the silage pit. After making several passes over the collected forage, the compaction level reached 100%. Now the mass was fully ready to be processed into silage. All that was left was to cover it with a film. Perfect. The fermentation process had begun, which meant all we had to do now was wait until it finished. I took the trailer and drove back to the farm. Since Since I needed something to do while waiting, I decided to sell some wood to boost our balance. At that moment, our balance was in pretty bad shape. In fact, we even had a small loan of $73. I filled one trailer with logs and took them for sale. From that trip, I managed to earn just over $13,000. Not wanting to stop there, I cut down a few more trees, filled up a second trailer, and sold it as well. After that, our balance reached almost $27,000. That seemed like a good point to end the working day. I neatly parked all the equipment in its place and went to rest. The next day, I went back to work in the forest. With the money I had earned yesterday, I decided to build a small log storage area right next to the spot where we usually cut down trees. It cost $10,000 and would be very useful in the future, since I was already planning to set up my own sawmill there. However, we didn't have much money left, so I decided to cut another full trailer of logs and take it for sale to increase our balance a bit. On the way, I stopped by the silage pit. The fermentation process had already passed 90%, which meant we'd soon be able to start selling. For now, I kept going and sold the logs. After that, our balance rose to just over $29,000. I decided to stop by the store to check how much a winch would cost. It would be really useful for forestry work, but honestly, the prices were disappointing. Everything was far too expensive, so I drove back to the farm. Passing by the silage pit, I noticed that the fermentation was almost complete, and it would soon be time to start transporting. I parked the trailer and began preparing for the sale of silage. To load it quickly into the trailer, I needed the right equipment. At the store, I found a small auger that perfectly fit our needs. It cost only $2,000, so I bought it right away and headed to the silage pit. By the time I arrived, the silage was fully ready. I set up the auger, went to get the trailer, positioned it, and started loading. I took the first trailer full of silage to the selling point and received $1,500 for it. That's when I realized that at this rate, it would take forever to transport everything, since there was still a massive amount of silage left in the pit. So I went back to the store and found a large trailer priced at $19,000. Without hesitation, I bought it and sold the old one. The new trailer was supposed to speed up transportation several times over, as it could hold almost 10 times more than the previous one. I hooked it up to the tractor and drove back to the silage pit. But as I got closer, I realized the trailer was too tall and the auger simply couldn't reach its body. I had no choice but to get into the pickup truck and take the auger back to the store. I sold the old auger and bought a new one, the same model but 1.5 meters longer. After setting it up, I immediately started filling the trailer with silage. After some time, the trailer was completely loaded. Then I headed to the selling point. Honestly, I was quite surprised that our tractor, although struggling a bit, still managed to pull a trailer fully loaded with silage. Even more impressive, I got to the destination fairly quickly. Now it was time to unload everything I had brought. For one trailer like that, we earned almost $16,000. A very good result, especially considering that we still had enough silage left for several more trailers, maybe even more. Now I had to transport all the remaining silage and completely empty the pit. All this time, I kept loading and selling our own silage. By the time it started getting dark outside, I had managed to earn just over $74,000. However, there was still quite a lot of silage left in the pit, so I decided to continue the work the next day. For now, I was done. I carefully parked all the equipment and went to rest. The next morning, I got back to transporting again, and when the last trailer was finally unloaded and sold, our balance reached just over $101,000. That really amazed me. After all, we had earned such a huge amount just from selling silage. I decided to head home and put that money to good use. First of all, I built a small sawmill of my own where we could now produce planks and beams. In addition, I finally decided to get rid of the old unfinished house on our farm and build a new, modern home so I could finally move out of the tent and live in proper comfort. Of course, the money we earned disappeared pretty quickly, but the result was absolutely worth it. Our farm had noticeably transformed, and the new house looked simply amazing. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.